future residents who will become stewards.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another exciting episode of Chocobo Dash. And I'm getting some massive background noise, so you'll have to pardon me for just a moment here. Wow, echo loop. Alright, sorry about that everybody. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Chocobo Dash. I'm your host, Nell Celestine. Unfortunately, I'm not able to get in touch with my co-host, Eliot Lefebvre, today, but I do have a wonderful co-guest today. I asked on the last episode if anybody who's specifically a raider wanted to pop on the show and talk a little bit about the raiding society and the raiding point of view, because Eliot and I are not current hardcore raiders, we are past hardcore raiders, and I wanted to get someone's opinion on things from a more current perspective, someone who's actually trying to do the bleeding edge side of the content. And I actually got a response, and I'd like to welcome my special guest today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. I play Nikki 7 on Sargatanis, and I also play Nikki 5, which is my alt on Leviathan. And I do consider myself a pretty hardcore raider. I might not be on the very bleeding edge. I'm not Elysium and I'm not Lucrezia, but I put in a lot of hours every week, and yeah, I make some good progress.
Alright, so it sounds like you are like a very good progression raider. Like, you may not be obviously cutting edge, because, well, let's face it, the cutting edge is a very, very small niche for the raiding society. Like maybe 0.1% of the top 5% of the top 10% of players.
Yeah, I would say. But my one claim to fame is, hey, my group was a server third on Leviathan for A1 and A2 Savage. So
hey, well there you go. That's something to be proud of, right? I mean, yeah, you weren't first, but still third. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, we were all taking off of work that one week, and I believe the first night we went like 22 hours straight just for A1.
Ow. Okay, I gotta ask, how do you stay focused for that long?
Oh, it's just an extreme drive and wanting to see the end and just being sick of the music.
Oh, I can understand that. To a degree, mind you, to a degree. We have to agree that there are some songs in 14 that we would listen to over and over.
Oh, I absolutely love the soundtrack in the game. I love every aspect of this game. I'm not just a raider. I also craft, and I do all the quote-unquote casual fare in the game as well. Like, you'll find me in the 24-man raids, you'll find me in dungeons, I'll duty finder stuff, and you know what? A lot of times I won't bring friends that I know are really good at the game into the duty finder. I want to see the whole spectrum of the player base. I want to be able to adapt to every situation, be it a newer healer that isn't quite cutting it and pushing my limits as a tank, all the way to the DPS that aren't really picking up their end of the deal. So I have to really push myself harder. And as a paladin, hey, that's a challenge.
I'm sure you don't have some of the problems I've been having.
With your triple triad?
No, I mean, I've been running Dark and Roulette, and since I'm not doing Savage, I'm going up against black mages that are I-205 struggling to hold hate.
Oh, yeah.
They
I can see that.
They just it's like, oh look, mobs, boom, boom, boom. Why am I getting hate? I'm like, stop it.
Yeah. Right now, I've been pretty much, I've been focused mostly on raiding, so I haven't experienced too much of the other aspects of the game as far as crafting, but I did level my goldsmith to 60 for those sweet BIS crafted rings for tanks, so, but hey, I was 8 out of 8 Lucius back in 2.x, so I know my way around crafting a little bit.
We have Freyari in the chat that says hi to you there.
Hey, it's from one of my FCs. So I run 2 characters. I have more than one.
Well, there you go. I mean, 2 characters, 2 servers. I'm assuming you'd have at least 2 free companies.
Yep, and they're both great. I really do enjoy the time I spend with the people in my free companies.
Alright, well, before we go diving down the reader loophole, let's take a look a little bit about the news that was released just today, actually. It's not something huge. It's not something everyone can participate in. It is the EU-related community team contest, but that's not to say that we don't talk about this stuff because, well, we do have UK listeners and other members of the EU community. There is a retainer adventure contest. Did you get a chance to look this over yet?
I did briefly. This morning, actually, I looked at that. I was at work, so I didn't get to look at it in full detail, but I was a little disappointed it's only EU.
I know, so was I. I was like, this sounds like something that would be really, really fun to do. I mean, yes, we have the map contest, and I think that's actually region-wide. I'm not sure. I can double-check that later. But I was like, oh, this sounds really fun. We could write stories about like how our retainers are like ripping walls off of people's houses and stuff like that, but...
Yeah, I think I made a Reddit comment to that, like talking about my retainer bringing back fish.
To this day, every time someone mentions Retainer Ventures, I still remember Omnom's comic where the two of them are sitting on the beach and just picked up 2 random items before coming back.
Yeah, I remember that.
Oh, Omnom, I can't wait for you to finish your classes and occasionally do comics again. I mean, we love you and we want to see you succeed, but it's not to say that we don't miss your work. But yes, the entry period is today, which would be October 2nd, for those of you who are watching live, until October 16th at 10 a.m. Greenwich Standard Time. Or Greenwich Medium Time, sorry, GMT. So it's a couple of days, about a little over 2 weeks, I'd say. And it's maximum of 500 words. Prizes are Bluebird Earring, Mandragora Earring, Erryman Earring, or Scarf of Wondrous Wit. And if you're in North America and you want to participate in something like this, why not check out the YouTube channel here where this is going to be posted later. Or if you're watching on the YouTube, just look down below. There's a comment box there. Write us a story. And we'll read it. I mean, who else is going to do it? We'll do it. And
definitely.
And chances are I might even give it a prize if we get some really good stories.
Yeah.
So there we go. This may be a contest. So what have you got to lose? If you want to write something fun, go for it. All right. But now for the reason I brought you here. I want you to tell me, from the Raiders' point of view, from someone who is actively doing Alexander Savage 3 now, which is almost the top tier. Because, well, Alex 4 is top tier, but Alex 3 is pretty savage from what I remember reading on Reddit a while ago, with the fact that it took the Lucrezia and all them like a couple of weeks to get through it. What is the mindset for groups that are going into this, like, and still throwing themselves at this?
Well, let me tell you something about Alex Savage 3. It is the static killer. If a static is going to break up, it's going to break up because of Savage 3. I have had 2 statics break up before. I'm actually participating in 2 separate statics right now, one for each character. You can kind of say I'm kind of hedging my bets. Hopefully, we can get through with both, and I'm hoping that the groups stick together, and they're both really, really great. The mindset is, let's get some progression done, even if it's just a little bit. Let's not regress. And, it can be a little daunting because regression does happen. People get discouraged. You might have one person make a mistake and everything kind of cascades from there. I know that's kind of a pun, not intentional. But, that's just the way it goes. And maybe somebody's underperforming and the group can get a little nasty towards that person. I've seen that happen before, and they might want to oust the person, and you see a lot of that. You see people that they might not be able to handle it, at least not in the current gear that we have right now.
I've said before, and I'll say this again: raid drama is the worst MMO drama that I have ever seen.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of it. But, if you can find a group that respects you as a player and you can give 110% effort, because it's a very demanding fight, and you can do your job. You know, a lot of groups are very cold towards the players that comprise them. They just want to get their win, and you know, you might not have as good group cohesion. I saw that with one of the groups that I went in very early on, and that's one of the reasons I'm no longer with them.
No, that makes sense. But like you said, a lot of the raid groups go cold. How do you prevent something like that, or is that something that's just a naturally occurring part of raiding?
Well, first off, you need a good environment where you can be professional when you need to be, meaning you can bring the goods during the fight, you can focus, you can do mechanics, you can put out the DPS that needs to be done, and that means everybody. That's not just the DPS. But, you know, keep it lighthearted in between pulls. When you make a mistake, you own it. You don't go playing the blame game. If you really truly made a bonehead mistake, then own up to it. You know, that's the only way to kind of get past that. If you're having trouble with a mechanic, don't stay quiet. You know, ask for clarification. If somebody wants, you know, let's say a raid leader, he wants to try a new strategy because he saw a video the other day, be open to it. Be flexible. You know, both of my groups, they do things extremely differently, you know, in regards to mechanics. They might, you know, do things differently with the hands. They might, you know, they might assign different things to different players. It varies. You have to be flexible. You have to be willing to do the mechanics and not have an attitude when you do it either. That's another thing, because that's infectious in a bad way.
Yeah, that's where I think a lot of the negative attitude towards some raiders comes out of, is when that attitude develops and then it spreads to members of the group, and then they take that attitude out of that raid and into other parts of the game. And I think that's where a lot of that negative stigma comes from. Now, raiders themselves I have no problem with. It's when raiders take that kind of arrogant, self-righteous attitude and bring it to the rest of the game that I have some issues with it. Because honestly, raiders now impress me. Like, I used to raid, and I don't have the patience for it anymore. I am flat out willing to admit that. I do not have the patience to sit there and throw myself on a grindstone for days, weeks, months on end. Coil was my last straw as a raider from raiding for years. And I'm at the point now where I'm more than willing to sit back and I'll do the raids as they get older, just so I can have some experience with it and be like, yeah, this is pretty fun. But the progression raider in me is gone. And one of the things that I've noticed recently is that the raid mentality is becoming a lot more... Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot more negative towards the outside community, when it was more indifferent before. And I don't think that's a good thing, and I think that's something that a lot of raiders should check in themselves before, you know, taking that outside the raid. Maybe, like, once you're done the raid, if you're angry and upset, maybe, like, take 20 minutes or half an hour, cool off before you go and do something else.
Yeah, and I definitely see it, because now my best friend in game, he recently quit playing, and I'll tell you, there's a different mindset in playing with someone who, okay, I'll give you a little background here. We used to be in a static way back in T5, and he was a great healer, awesome healer. But, you know, that static kind of fell apart, and we drifted apart, but we ended up back in the same FCs on the same server and everything. But we became friends, really good friends, and we played every day. We did, you know, all our dailies together, pretty much crafted together, you know, everything except for raiding. And he decided he didn't want to raid anymore. He just wanted to kind of take the game a little more casually. And, you know, and I still associated myself with the raiding circles within my server. And, you know, I even switched servers, and he followed me so that I could raid with a little bit more of a hardcore a hardcore group at the time. And, you know, faithful friend, great guy. And, you know, but he couldn't do things like turn 13, you know, because he never learned it. You know, you can't expect someone to be able to do a fight that they don't know. And I think a lot of it really showed the difference that that I saw between the mentality of a quote-unquote more casual player who kind of, took his own time, enjoyed the game at his own pace, versus someone who's rushing and being very competitive and being in those circles. And I consider myself competitive. I consider myself that sort of a player. But I always had him as a friend to kind of ground me and say, hey, don't become one of those assholes. Don't be mean to people. Now, hey, online comments and Reddit, a totally different story. I'm a complete troll, and I will own up to it, and I love it.
Hey, as long as you don't push the wrong buttons at the wrong time. That's trolling is one thing. Outright, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know.
There's a difference between the fine line of trolling and completely destroying somebody, and you don't want to cross that line.
On Reddit, it's a totally different thing. People are so salty over there, and that's just the way it is over there. That's the mindset. So, I kind of play into that, and I kind of push buttons and see how far I can go with some people, but I usually don't go past like one or two comments or whatever. And oftentimes if somebody does something really great, and I mean not just those crayon drawings you see upvoted 400 times, I'm talking about a really great accomplishment. Like we had one post there a while back, some guy got all the Zetas, and I was like, hey, it's not rating, but that's something pretty hardcore. Hardcore can apply to a lot of different things, and
rating is not the only hardcore part of this game.
That is correct. Now, usually in an MMO, when someone says, "Oh, that's a hardcore player," they usually imply rating. Now, I rate about 20 hours a week, in addition to working a full-time job. I've got a family, mortgage, the whole 9 yards. And yeah, I put in about that much time between the two groups. I consider that to be, more hardcore than casual. I don't label myself as casual. But then I see some crafters that are just completely hardcore at what they do. And they're very knowledgeable. They're gurus at what they do. And if I have a question, there's certain people that I know, hey, I'm going to contact this person because they're going to give me, the lowdown because this is what they do. And they put a lot of time into it and a lot of effort. But yeah, typically hardcore with the assumption, nothing added there, like not hardcore crafting, not hardcore... you can have a hardcore triple triad player, which I consider you to be.
Yeah, I could say that. I pretty much consider myself a hardcore triple triad player, or at least a hardcore triple triad collector. Mother of God, some of those are hard.
Yeah, I dabbled a little bit, but I didn't get too far into it. I just, just from my collecting of things that I kill, that's where my collection comes. And every now and again, I'll be like, let's see what this NPC can do. And I'll play a game or two, but I won't sit there for hours doing it.
Yeah, I have put in more than my fair share of time in the triple triad, I would say. I probably have put in, when I needed more of the cards, I probably put in more hours into card hunting per week than you did into raiding.
Probably.
When Heavensward dropped, and there was all those triple triad NPCs, I think I was doing... Because, like I said before on the podcast, that I took my time with progressing through the story. So that actually gave me more time to do other things, like explore and chat with NPCs on the side, do side quests and all that. It also gave me more time for Triple Triad. I probably sunk about 30 to 40 hours a week on Triple Triad. Just hammering out some of those cards. And the drop rate on the cards in Heavensward is abysmal. Absolutely abysmal.
Yeah, every now and again I get my doubles and I'll trade them in, and I'll see the NPCs there and I'm like, yeah. I always said I was going to collect them all, and at the time I was working on all my Luciuses right around when Gold Saucer dropped, and I kind of put that in the back seat.
I think it'll be easier to collect them all once that challenge log comes out.
Yeah, you might be right there. Buying all those packs. Now, some of the people I raided with back then were really hardcore into the whole triple triad thing, and I saw the what they had to do. And the first time I tried it, the first night, I think I went to bed at like 4 o'clock in the morning just playing cards. and, and I was like, okay, this is gonna kill me if I let it. So let's take this lightly.
Yeah, it's at least it's something that it is based off of the amount of effort that you put into it, plus luck.
Yeah,
it's not. It's a little too heavy-handed at times, mind you, but it's not something that you have to worry at the same time about making a mistake and then 7 other people having to pay for that. And that's one of the reasons why I like to make this my hardcore section of the game. It's something that I own those mistakes, and at least when I do make them and I screw up that match, I know it's not impacting other people.
Yeah. I mean, you're the only one to blame if you if you screw up by spending all your MGP on repeat cards and don't budget towards what you're taking in.
Flip a table, 300k on trying to get fucking Zidane. I would have had Cloud by now.
Yeah, but hey, you're almost there, so
this is true.
Keep trucking.
Soon.jpg.
That's right.
But there's so many parts of this game that people can be hardcore at, and just because players aren't rating doesn't mean that they're not putting in the hours. Like, you could have hardcore players that are role players and not actually progressing really at the game at all and just sit around and chat, but they are so intuitive to the game and love the game so much that they're playing it a lot. That's another definition for a hardcore player, and honestly, I think that role players are probably the hardest of the hardcore.
Well, in terms of in terms of effort towards a specific thing, you're probably right. To say that either you raid or you don't, either you're a hardcore player because you raid, or you're a casual because you just enjoy other aspects of the game. I think that's a false dichotomy.
I think so too. I think it's too much of a segregated line. Hardcore is not something that should be defining raid community, and for the while when I first started this series, I will freely admit that I used to call the raiders hardcore, and I used to say the hardcore community is causing this kind of problem, or the hardcore community is not thinking about that, and it's not the hardcore community. And after a while, I realized that, and I just started calling it the raiding community, or the crafting community, or the gathering community, and I would refer to the individual specific community rather than labeling it falsely.
Now, there are two sides of the coin when it comes to the amount of effort and skill versus people that you know, if you're going into a dungeon, and we've all been there, that 300 DPS black mage that's just sitting there not doing any sort of rotation that matters, and I'm talking up, you know, higher level, because 300 would be great lower level, but we're talking level 60 content. You're getting those lazy players that aren't doing what they're supposed to do. That's frustrating, especially when you're trying to pick up that slack for them, because you can only do so much as one player, no matter what role you're in. And you know, that gets really that really does get on my nerves. Now, I don't expect everybody to be fully mastering the game and being able to pump out 4-digit DPS at all times, you know, even as a white mage or something like that. No, I don't expect that, but you can tell when people are trying. Even when you get that newer player who's wearing greens in a level 60 dungeon. I've seen this one Dragoon. He was new. He had 145 gear, and you know, he was putting out pretty good DPS. And I was talking to him. I'm like, you know, are you new to the game? You know, he's like, you know, I just kind of play here and there, but you can tell, like, he did his research. He was doing his rotation, and as a tank, I look at that. I look at what people are doing. Is the monk doing his positionals? Is the black mage doing their rotation? Are the healers trying to at least throw a little bit of DPS? When you are a hardcore raider, you tend to get things like higher level gear. As a tank, I take a lot less damage, so I don't need as much attention as someone in lesser gear. So I like to see that my healer's doing a little bit of DPS when it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, don't as a healer, you know, your tank shouldn't be below 1,000 health.
This is true.
I'm looking at you, Duty Finder Healer from last night.
I do dabble in healing every now and again. I did get my White Mage on my main character up to 60. I will be working on Bard next, so I like to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. It helps me be a better tank, a better player. It helps me be more considerate, and I like to see that with other players. That really makes me happy when I see someone try to go the extra mile. It pushes me to want to do more. You know?
I can see that. Plus, it also gives you a better understanding of each job and how it works, and therefore, if you can understand how the job works, then you can apply that more in situations where it might be more necessary, like raiding.
This is very true, and the current state with Alexander, you really have to go the extra mile. You're not going to get anywhere just kind of doing the status quo. Like, I think you could have gotten away with that in some of the older raids, especially second and final coil, especially in first coil, because the game was new, so it wasn't as hard. But now, with Savage 3, and I can only imagine in Savage 4, you really do have to go the extra mile, especially when you're doing progression rating. That means, for instance, when we were doing A1, that means completely omitting Rage of Halone from my rotation. Do it a couple times in the beginning, and just try to pump out as much DPS as possible, because nobody has the gear that was really kind of expected. I mean, yeah, the fight's clearable in the 185 gear that we had going in, but the tanks really had to contribute more cooldowns, stacking them intelligently, just different strategies that you probably wouldn't do a month later on, or 2 months down the road when you had more gear, better weapons, that sort of thing.
Well, given the fact that Coil, turned, Coil 1, 2, and 3 were very much heavy on the mechanics, and from my understanding, Savage Alex is very much heavy on the DPS checks. Do you think that that's the route they're going to take this time, or do you think they're going to kind of pull back a little bit and then balance in between the two?
Well, we're kind of in a unique position in the fact that, the level 60 jobs, we've got new jobs, and we've got the old jobs have all new rotations. Pretty much every job has been affected, where by the time we got to second coil, things were pretty solidified for the level 50 stuff. We only got Ninja that was new, more towards final coil. As far as what they're going to focus on, well, Yoshi P already said, and I'd like to touch on some of this later with Paladin. We're in a pretty sorry state. Most Paladins are pretty much required right now with the whole meta to kind of level Dark Knight or level Warrior, level some other tank, so that they can take them into the other fights, especially A4. Moving forward, I would expect to see more physical or mixed damage. That's my prediction. Things are going to be a little more mixed, so that you keep Paladin or Dark Knight or Warrior as a viable tank in that in any fight going into the next tier. And as far as DPS checks, there has been some speculation that saying that they just artificially inflated the difficulty by doing that, so they can take more time to take vacations and kind of relax after Heaven's Ward was dropped. But I mean, hey, if you look at some of the stuff that's been posted on Reddit, it's already been stated that they use their own internal bots to kind of tune these fights, and I'm sure they have some real player testing as well within the dev cycle that goes on there. But it's my understanding that they do this. They have automated bots, let's call them, to kind of play through and do the rotations that they're supposed to do. And they even said the groups that were progressing at the time were performing better than these automated systems that they had in place. And that's pretty impressive, I must say. If you're doing better than what they programmed and what they expect there. But as far as the DPS checks, I think that's kind of a mainstay. We're going to see that. I think the thing that's really going to change is the outgoing damage, the type of damage. Mechanics, I really like to see unique mechanics and things that you have to react to. A little bit of RNG, but not too much RNG. if you know what I'm saying.
No. I can understand that. You want it to have a slightly more chaotic feel to it. A little bit of unpredictability, but not too much to the point where every fight is completely up to RNG.
Yeah, like she was a pretty good example of a mix between the RNG and scripting. The RNG factor being what stance she's going to pick next, and the script factor being that you know that when she's in her sword stance, she's going to do this sequence of moves, and that's how you have to react. I actually really like that fight, and I struggled a little bit with it at first because my static didn't really want to do it at the time, the static I was with, so I kind of had to pug my way through it, but that's a fight that I think was designed fairly well and challenging.
Renix3 in our chat says, I like mechanics more than DPS checks.
Yeah, I think you have to have a mix, though. I mean, new mechanics are always a great thing because they bring new things to the table, and when you're doing progression, I think one of the most fun things to do is just figure out what's this supposed to do? How are we supposed to get through this? And just kind of that trial and error state. Because, you go a week or two afterwards and, you have all the guides out from, Mr. Happy, Ms. Tech, Xeno, all the big names, they'll put out guides. But that initial week where nobody knows what's going on and you have to figure it out. I'll give you an example in A1. When we were doing progression, the Tank Buster, nowadays you think, okay, you do your cooldowns, you do a rotation of cooldowns. But before, we were trying everything. We were trying to, eat them as mini. We were trying, which sounds really counterintuitive, but, we were trying everything. And in A3 Savage, we made it to A3 first week in that log year, which was really rough. We had decided, okay, let's try using some of the potions, like, water resist potions. We'll try anything. We'll try, bringing them into the water. And we discovered, you can't do that. Just try everything. That's the mindset.
Yeah, I can see that. So, before we progress, I want to ask, because the chat mentioned, they would like to know a little bit more about how you and your stacks get along and how you're enjoying them.
Well, I'm pretty new with both statics. I put myself out there on the, FFXI recruitment Reddit, and I got a lot of hits, and all I mentioned really was kind of like my item level and the fact that I had an alt, and I had a bunch of groups that wanted to try me out. So it got a little expensive there with moving. What I would do is move my alt to their server and try out and see if they were a good fit. And I had one. I was on Leviathan at the time my static had broken up. I had a group on Leviathan, which I'm with on my alt, and I really like those guys. They're a nice bunch, and I didn't want to say, hey, I want to raid with this other group on this other server, so I said, you know what, I'm going to split my time between the two, because I like this group. They seem like a really nice bunch of people, and with my group on Sargatanis, I was very impressed by their numbers and how far progressed they were in the fight. They seem to be right at my level of skill, and they're also a very nice group of people. And we are making progression, and we're seeing later portions of the fight every single time we go in. But hey, the more I raid, the better I get at the fight. So that's pretty much where I'm at. Like, the way I see them, I enjoy my time with both groups, and I enjoy the people in there. They're very mature, but they're also, you can tell a dick joke.
That's how you could tell if your group is perfectly in tune.
Yeah, there you go.
There's your ultimate test, people. If you want to check to see if your static is in tune with each other, tell a dick joke, and everyone has to laugh. All right. Let's take a look at the last week's episode, with the question of the week being, for a Final Fantasy minion added to 14, what minion would you want? Now, aside from you, who answered, we did have a Daniel Cormier, also known as Riku Strife. For a Final Fantasy minion, I would want a Yuffie minion, and she could be juggling materia for her animation. Daniel also mentioned that Void Ark, which we mentioned in last week's episode, has to do with the Mashi, which were involved in the 5th Astral era and caused part of the 6th Umbral era. They were the ancestors of the Baladins, or Baladians, which are the ancestor cities of Silda and Ulda. They were the Black Mages who fought against the White Mages in the War of Magi. So, hey, as long as the Ascians aren't involved, we're good and clear.
There you go.
But why don't you tell us your answer? I'll let you take this to the ears of the people.
I couldn't decide on a single character or a theme from Final Fantasy. I've been a fan of this series since 1991. I'm a little bit of an older player.
Oh please!
Tifa.
I have Final Fantasy 1 on my shelf from when it first came out.
Yeah, I'm a long time fan of the series, and well, my favorite has always been Tifa. And you can always check the comments. I won't go in huge detail as to why she's my favorite here, but you can always read my comment. She's my absolute favorite of all time. I'm looking at I have a nerd shelf here, and I'm looking at my little Tifa figurine right next to my Heavensward Midgard-Zormr dragon. He protects her. Anyway, if it's not some sort of a character, what did I say here? Like something along the lines of Doom Train, but we know we're getting that. Something less conventional, less human looking. I would say like something like Shadow Lord. I really liked his model, and I think the whole minionization of the Shadow Lord would be really cool to see, or like the 4 Sky Gods from 11.
Well, technically we have one of them.
Yeah, technically, but I'd love to see Byakuya as a little minion with the fangs, and they could reskin one of the cats and just put a Byakuya head on him with the fangs. I think that would be great. And I went into some of the other characters from Final Fantasy that I adore, like Auron, Riku, Fusoya, Matoya. Matoya would be a great little minion, with a little crystal ball. I think she'd make a good one. So.
And you also went on to mention about Chrono Trigger minions. I mean, we had the 20th anniversary of Chrono Trigger this year.
This is true, and Chrono Trigger in Final Fantasy, it's not part of the series, but it's always been close to the series, and there's some potential there. I mean, hey, even Dragon Quest, we've got some minions and some items from Dragon Quest, and it is Square Enix. They own both of them.
I still want a slime minion, an actual Dragon Quest slime minion.
That would be very, very awesome. Do you remember the little slime controller they had? I think it was for PS2 for Dragon Quest VIII.
Yes.
That was very cool looking, but I always wondered, like, how could you actually play the game with that controller? It doesn't look like it would be very comfortable.
No, it wasn't. I can tell you it was not. Oh, but it was so adorable.
Yeah, that would look great on my nerd shelf here.
I do not have that. I was at a friend's house who had it, so.
Oh, okay.
Sadly. But no. But yeah, like, there is so much potential in the Square Enix universe, not just limited to Final Fantasy, that they could pull from. And they've shown that they have the ability to pull from it by bringing the Dragon Quest event when the anniversary came over. With the Dragon Quest first year anniversary, and we got the Brickman battle, and we were able to get the mini Brickman, which I absolutely squeed when that came up. And
I snagged that right up. Now, to be fair, certain things I think probably wouldn't fit very well, even though Square technically owns the IPs. Like, I don't think I'd want to see a Hitman minion.
No, obviously not. But to say that they can't pull some stuff, like, who knows, like, maybe down the line we could get more Poppets, and one could look like Agent 47, or I think
I'm sure it'll have appeal.
We could have one that looks like, I think it's Adam, what's his name, in Deus Ex?
Now, that's a series I never really got into. I always wanted to. I heard really good things about it, and I never actually played that series.
I have been wanting to play it. I have it. I'm a huge Cyberpunk fan, but I haven't gotten around to it because I prefer my Cyberpunk. Like, I prefer either creating my own Cyberpunk character or playing a female Cyberpunk character. and you can only play a male in the first one at least. I don't know about the new one.
I have a hard time right now playing any other games. I've tried. I end up feeling guilty. Like I should be playing 14. I should be doing some sort of progression. I should be leveling this or crafting this. So at the moment, 14 is the only game that I devote any time to. All of my free time, if it's not spent working or spending time with my kids and my family. I'm pretty much playing. That's what I do.
No, that is entirely your choice, entirely fair. I mean, everybody is free to make their own choices with what they want to do with their time, right? And you should, though, not feel guilty, I would say, about not playing 14. You can feel that you want to progress, that's one thing, but I would say never feel guilt about not playing, because that's not a good feeling. That's, like, I would say almost a sign of being having an addiction or something. And I don't mean to say I'm not
strong compulsion.
Very strong compulsion. There we go. That's a better term. But I mean, like, you shouldn't feel bad about wanting to take a little bit of time off or take a little time for yourself to do something different.
Oh, I do. I do
Yeah.
other things. I will take breaks, and sometimes I'll walk away, especially between dungeons if I'm chaining a bunch of little activities together. I'll make sure to get up and walk away and see what the kids are doing, or and other things like that. But maybe guilty is not really the right word. I have a very competitive nature, and I see other people progress, and I'm like, if they
want to put a little bit more
can.
time into it. You want to put a little bit more time, and you want to get a little bit farther. You want to push it a little bit more. And
Yeah.
I can understand that, and I can appreciate that. But just don't burn yourself. That is what I'm going to say on that one.
Yeah, sleep definitely suffers with the way that I play and work and read and all that.
All right,
Sleep definitely suffers.
So let's say that I'm just going to say this out. Let's say you've beaten Savage 4, okay?
Mm-hmm.
As a progression raider, you're not progressing anymore. You're into farm mode, essentially.
With raiding.
Yeah, but I mean,
then,
are you going to feel that drive as much, or is this going to be like your chance to pull back and relax a bit?
No, there's crafting to do.
Yes, but I mean, like, from the like when you were saying earlier a little bit about the guilt thing, like, does that pull back a little bit, and you're like, okay, I don't have this pressure for the raid anymore. I can do other things, be it in 14 or elsewise.
Well, the two main things I do that I identify myself with: number one, raiding; number two, crafting. I absolutely adore crafting in this game, and I can't wait until I get to the point where A4 is on farm, so that I can devote more time. Because I dabbled a little bit, but I dabbled to help myself along with raiding. I want to actually sit down and enjoy what they've added to the game with the crafting aspect too. And I know it's kind of a mess right now with the red scripts, and I do read, and I try to keep up with that, but hey, if I'm not reading, there's other things to do. I'm definitely not one of those that's complaining about being bored. There's a ton of stuff that I see on my plate as far as I want to overcome the raid first, and then, become that level 60 Omni Crafter, and then from at that point, I'll find something else to do in the game. I will.
Triple Triad takes another soul. But I say that I think we've pretty much covered the brisk of this topic. So why don't we talk a little bit about Paladin's situation in the endgame raid before we get ready to close out?
Oh boy. Well, okay, I can talk a lot about Paladin. Paladin is my main. It is what I absolutely love, and I will sit there and read all kinds of theory craft about Paladin. Absolutely love the job. I'm a little disappointed with what Square Enix did with Paladin, or lacked to do with Paladin in regards to how they designed the raids. That's not to say that Paladin isn't viable. Hey, I go through A1 and A2 just fine on a Paladin. I can put up numbers, but I feel it takes more effort to do so. And it does need a little bit of a tweak, in my opinion. I think we could use a little bit more DPS, a little bit more quality of life. I've got some ideas that I would do to kind of line up Paladin and make it a little more viable. Now, a lot of people say, oh, homogenization, this and that, but you don't want any of the jobs to kind of get left out. And that tends to happen. You look at Final Coil with Summoner, they were kind of in an awkward position, and nobody wanted to take them. But on the flip side, I think a lot of it is also groupthink. You get these ideas in people's heads, and it tends to spread. And then people think, well, Paladin's not viable. We don't want a Paladin. We don't, or if we get a Paladin, we want him to also have Dark Knight. And that makes sense for a group that might be working on A4, because, at the moment, Dark Knight is just a more viable job for the way that fight is designed. And therein lies the problem, is the fight design. It's very magic heavy. Paladin doesn't have many tools to deal with magic. They're more of a physical mitigation tank. That's not to say they can't do it. There's been groups that have cleared A4 with Paladins. But a lot of the hardcore raiders will say, well, they carried the Paladin. The Paladin didn't deal their share of damage or whatever. And yes, well, I will say DPS is everybody's responsibility in the raid. You look at group DPS, you don't look at my DPS, and a lot of people think that way. But yeah, Paladin needs help. It's very hard to kind of compete with the job right now compared to warriors that can completely mitigate things and also bring 4-digit DPS. And Dark Knights are just about there too, and they can also mitigate.
Not to mention that Warrior throws a debuff on that lowers slashing resistance, which makes everyone do more damage.
This is very true. And what does Paladin have right now? Rage of Halone, and that's more or less kind of useless with the way that the fights are designed right now. But they're pretty good in A2, I'd say. That cover mechanic does come in handy. The shield, hey, we take less damage. It's still a viable job. It might not be, now I can't say this firsthand, but yeah, it might not be as viable as A4 in A4 as, let's say, a Dark Knight. But you can still put up some numbers with Paladin if you know the rotation well and you plan your moves ahead, which is kind of the way that I play it. I know what I'm going to do 2-3 moves ahead of time, and I know how to adapt that in case things go awry. You don't want to tunnel into any rotation when you're playing. That's a big problem. A lot of people suffer from that. But yeah, the job needs a little bit more damage, in my opinion. Maybe a stronger dot on Goring Blade, or maybe a little more potency on Royal Authority, and a little more enmity on Rage of Halone. Just not too much, just to make us a little bit more competitive. Put us, if a Dark Knight can put up 800-900, maybe subtract 50 or 100 from that as a Paladin potentially. Right now,
well, the problem I see with that is, one thing that I think that would make all the difference for Paladin is Sword Oath needs to be retuned.
Yeah, I agree, and they have to come off the global cooldown. I mean, magic costs fine, but take them off the global cooldown. Shield swipe too.
Yeah, because it's just like, I look at it, and I look at how Dark Knight works with Grit, and the fact that I can then turn around and still put up, blood...
A blood weapon?
Yeah, no, not blood weapon. Blood weapons doesn't work with Grit. It's the other one.
Dark Side.
That's it. Thank you. I can put up Dark Side. I just call it Red Sword thingy when I get a little bit tired. I've had a long day at work, but when I put that up, I'm only losing 5% of my maximum DPS. Technically, mathematically, I'm losing. I think it's something like 6.2% because the way the math works.
Yeah.
But still, the point is, I'm only losing a very small amount of DPS, whereas Paladin, when they pop off that Shield Oath, which is their only way to really survive and tank, they're losing a flat 20% of their damage, period. And if they switch to Sword Oath, they lose all of that enmity bonus and the defense bonus.
Yeah, well,
for next to no bonus. Like, honestly, I think if anything, Shield or Sword Oath should be able to stack on top of Shield Oath with, instead of, say, 15% attack boost, which is what Dark Knight has. Because Dark Knight, let's face it, is supposed to be more offensive tank. But what if it was like 10% damage boost and 5% magic reduction?
Well, the key to all of this is balance. You want balance between the three jobs, and before, I think they did a pretty decent job of making the paladin/warrior tanking pair kind of an inverse of each other, and now throwing in Dark Knight into the mix and trying to make it kind of a melding of the two jobs, because that's the impression I got when I first saw Dark Knight. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, it's a paladin reskin." It's not quite a paladin reskin. It's
not.
It's its own job in its own right. I mean, some of the moves are. I mean, how many different ways can you say mitigates damage? 20% and 30% or whatever. It's not a carbon copy. It has its own play style, and I feel it's more frantic than Paladin. There's a lot more off global cooldown stuff, but But that
MP cost. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Basically, if you're not spamming that MP regen combo, it's basically like drop that dark side and start fucking gaining more MP back.
Yeah, but in these endgame fights, I'll give you one gripe I have. For instance, a Dark Knight can drop grit for a lot of stuff, and it's pretty easy to do so, and throw on Blood Weapon and go to town and put up some numbers where you can. Where it's much more cumbersome for a Paladin, you lose a global cooldown for one, and you start taking a lot more damage in Sword Oath, and that it's almost like your healers have to baby you more, and they can't DPS, so that damage is coming from somewhere. You can go full Sword Oath and full slaying accessories or whatever, or a nice little mix of crafted and slaying, and you can put up some good numbers. Hey, on my ult the other day, I was doing about 900 on, but that means that the healers have to kind of just watch my HP a lot closer. So yeah, Paladin has the mathematical potential to do so, but it doesn't translate well to the way that the job is designed, along with the fights currently as they are in Savage, in my opinion, at least.
So, let's say Square doesn't adjust the job. What adjustments would you like to see to the endgame raids to make up for this?
Well, personally, I really like the way that Turn 13 worked, where you got an initial physical hit followed by successive magical burst hits. I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, the first time you go in, it's very intimidating to see that much damage being taken off of your character, and in some cases I've seen some streams earlier on where people were getting just completely owned and one-shotted or close to it. But I think a mix of damage types I'd like to see. I'm a fan of Turn 13 and the way that was designed. It's one of my favorite fights in the game. Turn 9 also, I like the way that fight was. It felt extremely challenging at the time. It felt like there was a big mix of different things you had to do. It took a lot of people a long time. I didn't feel that the difficulty was artificial at all. I felt it was genuine. You had to learn these mechanics or you and your group are going to die. And if somebody screws up, you're all dead. Now a lot of people say, "Oh, that's a group jump rope." Maybe, but I just like the way those fights were designed. I thought they were designed very well. They're some of my favorite fights in the game. And now going on to the way that A3 and potentially A4 are designed, why do it that way? I don't get it. I don't see why they would change what was a winning formula. But hey, I
think because there was a lot of complaining that when they released the final set of turns, that since people beat it within the first week, that I know I'm using the word "that," but I'm trying to frame the point here. That a lot of people started raging on the forums that, oh my god, Endgame rating is so easy now. Oh my god, this was beaten in a week. Square, what are you doing? Make the fights more difficult. Make them harder. Give them more DPS checks. And Square delivered on that. These fights are now harder and require more DPS checks, but at the cost of less new mechanics because they've released Alexander Normal.
Yeah.
You can't please everybody, and you can't definitely please people that change what they want all the time. So Square is taking the feedback, trying to learn from it, and give players back what they want, or at least what they're responding to what the players say that they want. The only thing I'm going to say is if you want these Savages to be more mechanics based and less DPS heavy, provide that kind of feedback to Square. Say, hey, look, I'm someone who's doing this on a regular basis. This is my feeling based off of my personal experience. Here's some examples of how things are going down. This is my personal suggestions for how this could be improved. You can take this information and use it as you see fit.
Yeah, I mean, especially in the official forums, you see a lot of armchair game designers, and they might be asking for something, and it's kind of like a case of be careful what you wish for, you just might get it. And it doesn't always turn out that great. And in my opinion, no, a raid should not be beaten on the first week. It should be tuned a little bit better than that. There should be more mechanics and more mystery. The first week should be all about figuring how stuff works, not figuring out how much raid DPS do you need. Like, sure, at some points, but that seems to be a reoccurring theme here. How much raid DPS do we need to get past FOSS, or to get past Hands of Pain, or some of the other DPS checks that are littered throughout the current tier? And I like the mystery of solving how does this mechanic work. Look at turn 12. I really like the way they did a lot of things in that turn. Yeah, you have your DPS checks, but you also have to figure out how best to work as a group to, let's say, move the Benus from one end to the other, or should you only move them between 2 points, or should you make a circle or a square, or I like that sort of thing. Working together on a mechanic. It's another fight I really did enjoy the way they designed it. I'd like to see more like that, with some more difficulty, perhaps. Sure, some sprinkled with some DPS checks every now and again. Hey, you have to keep people on their toes. Some tank checks, some heal checks. Balance it out. Don't lean so heavily on one aspect, or you're going to kind of get stale. But yeah, keep it challenging. I think they do a pretty good job overall in designing a lot of these fights. I'm not too impressed by some of the stuff we're seeing in the current tier, but not as impressed, I should say, as impressed as I was in Second and Final Coil. But hey, it's still, I know it sounds weird saying this 2 years into the game, but hey, it's the first expansion. They're still kind of learning things as they go. Nobody counts 1.0. As far as the way that raids are designed, it was a completely different game back then mechanically. As far as the raid scene goes, people don't count 1.0 as much. No,
you can't count 1.0 raids as raids for 2.0 because the way that those were designed is fundamentally and mechanically completely different. Because that was a completely different battle system. Same with 11. 11, yes, there's a lot of waiting in 11. Yep. Mother of God, there's a lot of waiting in 11. Or at least there was. Long. At least there was. And that's something that a lot of rose-colored glasses tend to forget.
Oh, yeah. But, hey, at least they're receptive to feedback. At least they're listening to the players out there, and they are eager to please. You have to give them credit for that. They do listen, even if they do it ham-fistedly at times, or in some people's opinions they do. They're giving effort. They're trying to care. And when you go onto the official forum, sure, there's a lot of complaints and stuff, but hey, be thankful that we have such a wonderful game, and it's full of great lore, and I can go on and on about this game and just every wonderful thing about it. For as many complaints as there are, there's so many good things that go overlooked, and people shouldn't forget about that. It's a great world. and there's a great community behind it, and it doesn't get that recognition the way it should, in my opinion.
All right. Well, with that said, I think we should wrap up the show here. This is a good jumping off point, I feel. We can discuss this more another time if you'd like to be a guest sometime. Maybe once the next set of Alexander comes out, you can give us some feedback from that point of view.
Well, I'll still be reading. Whenever it comes out, I'll be there.
All right. Well, then, since you are a guest, I specifically asked you over Twitter to come up with a question of the week for our listeners. So, did you get a chance to think of one?
Well, I thought of a couple different things, but question of the week: what would you consider to be hardcore versus casual?
That is an interesting question of the week. So, the question of the week is, what do you consider hardcore versus casual? Alright, for me, I would say hardcore is anyone who sinks time into this game to try to be good at any one particular part of it. Not stellar, not amazing, not the best, but at least good.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Like,
but there's different opinions out there.
You don't have to. This is my opinion, obviously, because of this. And in my opinion, someone who's casual is someone who logs in, maybe checks the market board, does a couple of roulettes, picks their nose for like 20 minutes, and it's like, I'm done. I'm gonna log off now. Like someone who's basically logs in, plays like it for a little tiny bit, just enough to taste, just enough to enjoy for a short time period, then hops off. That, in my mind, is a casual player.
Yeah. So, there's definitely a difference in effort between the two paradigms.
Well, since you proposed the question, where's your stance on this?
I think that a lot of people, when they hear the word hardcore, they default to the raider. But I don't think that's necessarily true by definition. I know in casual speak we'll say, oh, that's a hardcore player. They mean that the person logs in a lot of hours or, challenges the highest content in the game. Or they might say it in relation to the player's skill. They might mean that the person is a very good player, an exceptional player. They'll say that they're a hardcore Dragoon. They might focus completely just on Dragoon and excel at that job. I can think of a couple players that are extremely good at one particular job. And there's a lot of hardcore players that are great at a bunch of jobs. I've seen players that you stick them in DPS, you stick them in a tanking role or a healing role. It doesn't matter. They're gonna be awesome at all three, no matter what job they play. So it means you have to be more specific, I guess, when you're talking about certain topics. But yeah, there's hardcore crafters out there. You can be hardcore at just about anything in this game. It has a lot to offer.
Alright then. With that in mind, everybody, please leave any positive or negative comments in the box below. You can like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at NellCelestine, or on Twitch, which is twitch.tv/NellCelestine. You can also check out my co-host, Eliot Lefebvre, who is not here with us this week. He just emailed me while we were discussing here and was running late, and I told him not to worry about it. So he'll be back again next week. So you can check him at Eliot_Lefebvre, or you can look up The Wisdom of Nim on Massively Overpowered. He also has his own Patreon page if you are interested in supporting him. Now, Nikki, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm pretty new to Twitter. I pretty much joined a while back, but I didn't use it until I started really interacting with podcast people like you. I'm at KMFDM_KID2000. And that's pretty much my presence. You can find me trolling on Reddit with the same name. I'm not always nice, but I'm on there.
Alright, so with that in mind, everybody, thank you very much for listening. I'm Nell Celestine, and my guest of the day,
Nikki 7.
Bidding you adieu.